and welcome to another video. I'm Dr. Cheryl Hurst, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow with the Center for Employment Relations, Innovation and Change at the University of Leeds. Today, I'm going to be talking with Esme Terry about her most recent paper. Esme is a research fellow in the Work and Employment Relations Division at the University of Leeds. Her role is affiliated with the ESRC-funded Digital Futures at Work Research Center called DIGIT. She's currently researching the impact of technological change and digital work across sectors, using a qualitative case study approach. Esme's other core research interests lie in the sociology of work and employment, with a particular focus on inequalities in the workplace. Her research on professional service firms explores the dynamics of the Scottish legal sector, lawyers' experiences of work, and the role of social class within the law profession. So thanks for joining us, Esme, and like I said, we're going to be discussing your paper in the Work, Employment and Society journal titled Emotional Labor and the Autonomy of Dependent Self-Employed Workers, the Limitations of Digital Managerial Control in the Home Credit Sector.
So this paper is part of an output from a larger project that explored home credit and the work of agents and lending company employees. So it was funded by a private commercial industry partner. This was when I was working at Heriot-Watt University in the Edinburgh Business School with my colleagues Abigail Marks, who's a professor now at Newcastle University, Dr. Dimitri Christopoulos, who is still at Heriot-Watt, and Dr. Arik Dekesian, who's at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh.
To start the video, I wanted to ask if you could just give a brief summary of your paper for an academic but a non-specialized audience.
Yeah, so this paper forms part of the output from a larger project exploring home credit and the work of its agents and lending company employees. And this paper in particular considers the impact of digitalization on the labour process of agents and the related impact on worker autonomy. So home credit is a form of regulated high-cost consumer credit that's particularly prominent in post-industrial low-income communities. And it's characterised by the work of self-employed agents who act as intermediaries between lending companies and customers. So the sort of USP, if you like, of home credit is the face-to-face interaction between agents and customers to facilitate loans and subsequent repayments. So something that has changed in home credit in recent years is the regulation of the industry by the Financial Conduct Authority, who took over industry regulation for high-cost credit providers in 2014. So this obviously created regulatory changes for the industry, but it coincided with technological change, and lending companies started to use digital lending applications that are accessed by agents through tablets or phone devices in order to monitor the lending decisions that were being made, but also to use algorithmic measures to make lending decisions where in the past the agent would have had more say over who they did and didn't lend to. So this means that lending decisions are more homogenized and less dependent on the relationship between agent and customer, and based more on algorithmic calculations of affordability. So most of the agents in this study welcomed this change. They believed it provided protection for their customers, but also for themselves in terms of a more streamlined and fair approach to lending decisions. So the industry has seen heightened digitalization in recent years, and we explored the impact of that digitalization on the work of agents. And what we find is that actually digitalization has a more nuanced impact than is sometimes reported in other pieces of literature. So we find that the autonomy of agents is decreased in some areas of the labour process, but is actually maintained in other areas of the labour process. Specifically, more qualitative work processes, in this case emotional labour, remained of importance and remained something that agents actually had quite a high level of autonomy over, despite increased managerial control in other areas of their work.
What would you say is the key contribution of your paper?
So, in terms of contribution, the article highlights the heterogeneous nature of the impact of digitalisation, particularly on worker autonomy. So, by considering digitalisation and autonomy in the context of more qualitative elements of the labour process, in this case emotional labour, we see that unquantified worker activities can actually be a source of autonomy against a background of heightened digital control enforced by management and organisations.
Right, so your paper seems interdisciplinary. Who would you expect to be reading it in terms of discipline?
So I think potentially the paper has quite a wide audience. Anybody who's interested in the impact of digitalisation on work, and particularly on the kind of dependent self-employed work that we explore in the paper. Um, Industrial relations scholars, labour process scholars. The paper really contributes to labour process and sociology of work debates about digitalisation and the future of work, and the impact that these phenomena might have on worker autonomy.
That certainly makes sense since it's published in Work, Employment, and Society, which I would
Yeah.
consider to be quite a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary journal in terms of who reads it and what it publishes. So it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly the emotional labour angle and looking at qualitative work processes makes it particularly sociological in its approach. But I think the fundamental contribution of the paper and the overall argument
Definitely.
certainly is relevant to a wide range of scholars and disciplines.
Your work shows that you're interested in work and employment and the future of work. But how has your thinking evolved since this paper, and what are you working on now?
So in terms of home credit, we have a couple of working papers on the go from this same project, looking at the sector more widely and the role of women in the sector, and delving a little bit deeper into the nature of the communities that home credit is prevalent in. So my current ongoing work is affiliated with Digit, the ESRC Digital Futures at Work Research Centre. So I'm working with colleagues at multiple institutions. The centre's led by the universities of Leeds and Sussex, by Professor Mark Stewart and Professor Jacqueline O'Reilly at Sussex. So my current work stream is around one of the centre's core research themes, looking at digital futures across sectors. So I have a particular interest in financial services. We'll be taking a case study approach to look at the future of work and the impact on stakeholders of digitalisation in financial services. Alongside the empirical work that we're doing, there's also a lot of conceptual work happening at Digit, looking at a theorisation of digital futures at work and what that might look like in terms of theoretical developments. So I've been working on conceptualising the connected worker, which is a term quite commonly thrown around at the moment, particularly in press and industry speak. So we've been looking at what that means at a theoretical level for future analyses. So I'm working on that with Mark Stewart, Simon Joyce and Manhal Ali at Bournemouth University. And we're also considering, on the connected worker theme, the impact of right to disconnect legislation on workers across Europe. So we'll be doing some analysis on large data sets, like large European data sets, to assess the impact of legislative changes around policy to do with workers' connectedness to their work.
Thanks so much for sitting down with me and talking about your paper. I know I enjoyed reading it, and I'm sure these readers will enjoy it. It's been great talking to you. Thanks a lot, Esme.
Thanks so much for having me.
As always, I'll link Esme's profile in the description box, as well as a link to the paper so you can find it more easily and keep up to date with anything that she's doing and anything that the Digit Center and SERIC are doing at the University of Leeds.